Hello and good evening. This is Michael from db&w. Welcome to our development live stream for July 2020. And today we'll be talking about the Surface Selector for Layout plugin, which I have actually renamed a little. But yeah, I'm going to show you why. So, yeah, let's get started. I loaded one of my standard test scenes, the RC helicopter from the Lightwave 2019 content. And I've also reworked the menu entries for the db&w tools. So there's a few more things here. And the first one that you will see here is Pick Polygon, which I've also assigned to the Alt-Q keyboard shortcut. And if I activate it, you will see that you get a green border around the viewport. And if you click somewhere within the scene, it's going to show you a pop-up menu. Within that pop-up, you have the option to open the surface editor with, in this case, texture body, which is the surface of the polygon that you just selected. You can open the node editor with that surface. You can also select any of the items that are underneath the point where you clicked. So even if there's items hidden by other items, it's still going to detect those, mainly because I need to do that when I try to find the current polygon anyways. So I've got that information, why not show it? And that's why I did change the name to Pick Polygon, because it's a bit more extended now. So you can basically select items here. You can add them to a selection, like to a multi-selection, and it shows you some information down here about the current polygon that you've selected, which item it belongs to, which surface is on it, how many vertices it has. In this case, I think it's a subdivision surface, so it's always 3 vertices. And it would also show you the part name as well as the smoothing group, if that is applied to that polygon. In this case, it isn't. So yeah, so you click somewhere, open Surface Editor, and there you have it, texture body. That's the one you have selected. And this is an OpenGL view, but it could even just be like a wireframe view. It doesn't matter. It still works. Same thing. And the other one is the node editor. That's the node editor for the texture blade. That's how it's called in the content. Now, in this case, I've discussed this on Discord today. That green frame is only being rendered around the currently selected view, which actually doesn't do it right now, because I'm being a bit too not aggressive enough in drawing my viewports. But if you go to multiple viewports, you will see that it even works in orthographic view, and it doesn't really matter what it's set to. I can probably even set it to a bounding box. It will still pick it up, because it's basically just sending a ray into the geometry, regardless of how it's actually being rendered in the current viewport. That doesn't affect it at all. The viewport is essentially just used to define the ray that's being sent into the scene. Okay, and if I click somewhere else here, you will see that the green frame moves. One of the questions that we had is if that green frame should always be on. I'll probably do that, so you know, okay, the polygon picker is selected. And hello, John. I don't think you're late at all. You're just in time. All right. So what you saw now is that you clicked on it and it showed you the pop-up right away. No, and I don't think there's a command to actually send that to Modeler, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so what you've seen now is you click on it and it opens the pop-up, and that's it. But actually what it does is it has some kind of pre-selection, which you can probably see it here. So if I click and leave the mouse button down and move across the mesh, you will see that it actually keeps updating the selected polygon, which gives you some kind of pre-selection highlighting, so you can be exactly sure that you're actually picking the polygon that you want, not something else, which in this case is steel 1. And once you release the mouse, that's when it actually opens the pop-up. If you go to the settings, and down here's a small help string, so it's N to open settings, like the numeric panel in Modeler, you will get this. And here you have the option to have a pre-selection highlight, which is what is enabled now. And that gives you this mouse down, move and drag, release and get the menu option. If I turn this off, then if I click on something, it's going to show the pop-up menu immediately. And you are not able to actually drag and select. This is more immediate, but it doesn't give you that preview of what you're actually clicking at. Hi, Jason. Yes, there is. I did talk to the Lightwave developers, and I did want to add some modifiers, like being able to press Control, Shift, and Alt, and things like that. However, while the SDK, the tool SDK, has data structures that would contain data like that, like the current modifier, these are actually not being filled in layout. The only thing I can do is I can distinguish between a left mouse button and a right mouse button. So what I decided to do is that if you use the right mouse button, let me just turn on the pre-selection highlight. If you use the right mouse button, you will always get this behavior of click, and then you get the menu. However, and this is the other setting here, for the left mouse button, you will have the option of either opening a menu or going directly to the Surface Editor, going directly to a node graph, or opening the selection menu, which is essentially the same as these two here. Of course, if there's like more meshes stacked behind the current selection, then this is going to be expanded. Eventually, the settings here are going to be saved. And they're going to be saved in your in a separate config file. So they're basically independent of the current scene. And yeah, that is essentially the current state of things. Let me just show you something, because I've actually tested that earlier. So the selection thing is quite neat as well. For example, in this case, I've got the scene, which is my backdrop, and the PCB2, which is like a seat, I think, in the helicopter. I'll just expand this a bit. And now I just want to select that seat. I've got that seat selected. And you can see if I click again, it doesn't actually allow me to select the seat again, because that is currently selected, so it's not even in the menu. The stuff that you can add to a selection or remove from a selection or select are always the ones where you can actually do it as well. So if I add the RC helicopter to my selection, now I've got two items selected, which is the helicopter and that seat. I think there's something here as well that I might be able to select. Oh yes, there is a PCB1, so I'm going to add that to the selection as well. Now I have a selection where I've selected the RC helicopter, PCB1, and PCB2. Now if I click on this again, you see that I can't select either of them. I also can't add them to the selection because they're in the selection already, but I can remove one of them from the selection. And if I click on this again, this is currently the PCB1 is selected. You see that I can't actually remove it from the selection because one item always has to be selected. So if there's only one item that's currently selected, the whole remove from selection options are gone. Hi, Louis. No, it only this. There's a couple of caveats with this. Basically, I'm using part of the SDK that basically allows you to check array against meshes, which also means that depending on the complexity of the scene, your first mouse click might take a bit longer because Lightwave has to compute acceleration structures for the geometry. What this allows you to do, you can only pick geometry. You will only be able to pick frozen geometry. So if there's like a subdivision mesh in the scene, it doesn't pick the original mesh, but the subdivided mesh. Also, it cannot pick instances because these don't actually exist as such. Not at least not in a way that you can select or ray trace against the geometry. It also does not allow you to select something like the new primitive shapes because they don't exist as geometry, and bones, lights, etc. None of these can be picked either. So it's just geometry. But since the initial idea was, okay, let's pick a polygon and then work with that selected polygon, I suppose it's kind of obvious that it doesn't work with any items that don't actually have any polygons. Which, I mean, even instances don't really have them. It's just that they're referencing other polygons. So yeah, sorry, no bones or anything like that. But yeah, that's all there is already, really. Yeah, and also one thing, if I got the pre-selection highlight on and I'm dragging across the scene or the viewport, you will notice that I've got some crosshairs here. Now the reason for that is that the mouse cursor automatically disappears if you're actually dragging something in Lightwave. That is something that Lightwave does, and I can't really force it to keep my mouse pointer visible. So, and to allow you to actually see what you're doing, where you are in the viewport, I decided to just draw a crosshair like that. Might have to change the color, but because yeah, the main reason for changing that is because if you have like a wireframe that's currently selected, and let's just select helicopter, it's the same color. You can't really see your crosshair here, so I might just have to turn it black or something, which isn't a big thing. It's just that's something I noticed when I switched to wireframe. Also, one thing it does, if I switch back to a quad view, if I drag here, then if you look closely at the top view, you will see that the polygon is visible there as well. So you can basically click and drag in one view, but see the polygon that you're selecting in another view as well. And to make that a little clearer, let's go to a proper test scene because this is way too fancy. Now, this is what I call a test scene. There's even no smoothing on this. Let me just... And basically, I just created this to check if my bounding boxes were correct and my different directions, because I have to get the orthographic views to work correctly as well. Oops. Yeah, maybe I should actually activate the tool. Pick polygon. There we go. And yeah, as you can see, that the selected polygon is visible in all the views, not just the one where you're actually picking something. And it even has a nice outline and a nice color. And then bam, you can open your Surface Editor. So essentially, what is missing with that current functionality right now is I need to save these settings and also get the functionality in so that if you use the left mouse button, it will actually use the option that you've selected here. I'm not that far. I mean, there's not that much left to do to get that going. But yeah, that is essentially all there is to it, really. Do you have any more questions or suggestions? I will have to look on the send to modeler. On the other hand, once you've selected an item, you can just press F12 and you're there. Also, one thing to note is that, as you have probably noticed yourselves, this is a tool, so this actually stays active as I'm doing something, and I can't really move anything. What I wanted to do initially is have an option where once you've opened the surface editor or performed the action after your selection, that it would drop the tool automatically and return you to your previous tool. Unfortunately, it looks like that isn't possible. At least all the versions I tried just crashed. So yeah, that's not an option. So unfortunately, what you will have to do is just press space and drop the tool, and then you're back in whatever previous tool you were in. So if I'm in the rotation tool right now and I activate this, select the polygon, blah blah blah, maybe just look at the information, and then drop it again, it just returns me back to position. There is nothing I can really do about that. And I don't know which tool was selected before this one was activated, and I can't really return to that either. A tool cannot drop itself. So yeah, I would have liked that to be a bit more fancy, a bit more automatic, but yeah, this is the only manual bit you will have to do yourself. Also, let me just go back to the RC helicopter. Just load it. This is also going to be able to going to show you how long it takes for the initial click. So if I click now, no, I have to activate the tool. Sorry. If I click now, then it takes a few seconds. Yeah, now we're there, until it actually computed the acceleration structure for that big mesh. However, I am trying to be as smart as possible. So if you ever seen with lots of objects, it checks the ray that goes through the viewport into the mesh against the bounding boxes of all the meshes in the scene first. And if it doesn't hit the bounding box, it doesn't compute the acceleration structure for that mesh either. So in many cases, it's probably not that bad. However, if you have a few massive meshes, you will have an initial delay before you select something. But once you're there, it's going to be fairly quick. The polygon highlighting is mainly used for dense surfaces. The main idea here was if you just had the crosshair, then you wouldn't really, you can kind of guess what you're pointing at, but you don't really know. So the idea to actually highlight that single polygon is just to give you an idea of which polygon you've selected. Selecting the whole surface would be fairly slow, especially for large meshes. So I'd rather not do that. It's certainly possible, but yeah, it would be quite slow. Also, one thing I'm doing when I draw this polygon is there is no hidden surfaces or something like that. So I'm essentially just drawing this polygon in 3D space, but on top of everything else. If I would draw a pre-selection for all polygons with that surface on this item, then for every mouse move that you make, I would need to cache them, or at least check. Maybe not for everyone. I could, be smart about that. But basically generate like temporary data that is then used for drawing, which contains all the polygons. Then draw all the polygons, which won't be as efficient as whatever Lightwave is using to draw them, because I don't have the SDK hooks. I can just draw one polygon at a time, whereas Lightwave can draw a whole batch of polygons at a time, which is a lot faster because it doesn't have the overhead of talking to the GPU as much. And also it would be rendered on top of the mesh, including the parts of the surface that are facing away from the viewer. So yeah, it's doable. I'm just not sure how practical it is and if it's really worth it. At least for this purpose. So the main idea is really just to give you an idea of what you're actually clicking on, what you've selected, so you know that okay, I'm actually on this part of the helicopter, not on the background. And as you can see, if I'm actually on the background, it renders that polygon in front of everything else. This is in front of the helicopter. Also, one issue I still have is that if you look at the blade here, even though this should actually select the blade, it doesn't. And there's some parts here that seem to be parts of the blade, even though it's not visible there. That blade still has me stumped. I think there's some transformation that's still missing. Maybe this one has a pivot point that's moved somewhere else or so. But yeah, this is a tricky one. I still need to find out what's going here. And the odd thing is, I tried to replicate that with like other scenes, and I couldn't. So yeah, this is tricky. You can't select surfaces under the cockpit. Actually, you can't. No. However, let me just check. That is a good question. Jason is right, because in this case it actually doesn't. It allows you to pick the different items, but not the different surfaces. Now I could extend this list. That's not really a big deal, to have like an open surface editor, plexiglass, and whatever is behind that and whatever is behind that, which would give you multiple entries. The problem is with the left mouse button, you would probably need to have another option where with the left mouse button, for example, if you always want to open a node editor, if you use the left mouse button to do this, and there's only one surface, then it's going to directly open the node editor. If there's more than one surface, it will either show you a pop-up with all possible surfaces, or, and that would be the option, will directly open the node editor with the topmost surface. That should catch all the possibilities. And you're right. I think I thought about that like 2 days ago when I started, and completely forgot about it because I made good progress. But that's not really a big deal. So yeah, let me just write that down. But I think you would still want the option to be able to just click on something and have the node graph open on the frontmost polygon, regardless of how many there are, without any further interactions. So you will need the option to ignore all the other ones. I just need to find a nice way to word that in the user interface, but yeah, that's possible. So yeah, that's the current state, and that's all there is really. So far, this has been how much code? Yeah, we're at around 590 lines of code, but I did use a lot of the stuff that was developed for the depth of field helper, which is the first time when I used this whole intersection code in Lightwave, what they call the spatial query SDK. And the other part was essentially ripped out of the spline tool, spline edit tool, the whole interaction and everything like that. And yeah, the problem with that is then you would just have a green mess if you have all the polygons, including the ones behind the current one selected. Also, and that's another caveat for this, it only selects or only picks the frontmost polygon per mesh. So if you have like your canopy and what's behind the canopy within the same mesh, it's always going to pick the canopy, and it won't be able to see anything else because essentially we're tracing into the mesh and looking at the first surface, and that's it. However, if they're different meshes, then they're also basically separate queries by the plugin, and it will be able to differentiate them. It probably would, yeah. Depth of field in there would be a pain. So in that sense, since the whole intersection thing is so basic, that's really all like the kind. I mean, I suppose I could basically add like secondary rays that are being traced inside the mesh, but that would really slow things down. Because I would then also have to check if the rays actually hit something or yeah, tricky. I think I'll just leave it at the first polygon per mesh right now, unless I've got nothing else to do. But we wanted to check out depth of field. No, we didn't. Carm did. Let's have a look at depth of field in there. Oh, it's actually on. There we go. And let's make it a bit more extreme. So let's see what happens now. Are you as excited as I am? Well, it does something. The problem is you can't really see the selected polygon. Actually, it is being blurred as well, because you can barely see it here. But you know, when things get super blurry here, you can still see something. But yeah. But surprise, surprise, it does work. So yeah, the depth stacking thing, I'll need to think about that. I might be able to find a way that works. Could be tricky, no promises here. But the selecting polygons from different items and being able to pick which ones of these you want to use, yeah, no problem. I'll be adding that. Well, in this case, though, the cockpit is a part of the helicopter. So since it's really the same mesh, it's not a different item. And in this case, it wouldn't work. If it was a different item, then with the additions, you'll just have multiple options to select of multiple surfaces to open in the pop-up menu anyways. So that shouldn't be a problem. Also, one thing to note, but it's kind of automatic due to the way I'm storing data internally. All of these are sorted by closest to the camera or closest to the view to furthest away from the view. So in this case, PCB1 is closer than the scene item. The same thing will be true for multiple entries here for Open Surface Editor, Open Node Editor. These will also be sorted from the closest to the furthest. But yeah, if you really want to be able to differentiate different polygons that are visible from that view and actually face the view, but are within the same mesh, I will need to do basically multiple intersections per item. So essentially, what I'd need to do is, for example, in this case, I would have to take my first intersection, which is the plexiglass, then add a small offset to that, and then intersect into the geometry again to see if I hit another polygon and save that. Then add a small offset, and the size of that offset, finding the proper size for that, it probably isn't trivial either. And then trace again into the object until I eventually don't find anything anymore, which is when I'm actually exiting the mesh. This would work in every case, including if something is not transparent. So, if you select something like this part of the chassis, you might end up with 10, 20 different surfaces. And one thing I could do is consolidate them so that, if they use the same surface, they don't show up in the list twice, something like that. But yeah, it's not impossible, but it needs some thought. And it's something I didn't actually think of. So let me just write that down. I would certainly just make that optional, because I can imagine that it could slow down things a bit, especially as scenes get more complex. Multiple polygons per mesh. Noted. So yeah. Also, one thing I wanted to do for the initial click when Lightwave has to compute the acceleration structure, I wanted to add some progress bar or some indication that Lightwave is doing something. Unfortunately, once that click happens, once I know where it happens, once I'm telling Lightwave to start computing intersections, there is no chance for me to actually change something in the display to show that it's busy. All the times I have tried doing that, they basically showed up when it was too late. So basically Lightwave would start doing all these heavy computations and nothing would happen on the display. And once it was done, a progress bar would pop up, which doesn't quite help. So yeah, that's why you don't get a progress for the initial click, which might be a bit slower than expected, but there's just not much I can do about that. So it's not like I didn't think of it. But the nice thing is that the acceleration structures are actually cached by Lightwave, because when I drop the tool now, and it doesn't matter if I go to a different view or whatever, and activate the tool again and click, now it's instantaneous. So it's always the first time accessing a mesh in a scene session in layout, that's when things will be slower. But once you've done that, it's going to be cached for subsequent frames and different evaluations. And this even goes so far that if something like the depth of field helper, which uses the same mechanism, needs an acceleration structure for a mesh to check for intersections, it's going to use the same cached structure that Lightwave generates. So they're not, doing duplicate work in that sense. Or if you had to intersect a mesh in the polygon picker and then go to the depth of field tool and pick the same mesh, it's going to use the acceleration structure that was created for the Polygon picker already. So yeah, also we did have one small request today, which was like 10 lines of code. I think it was Michael, who's in the chat. I think he is, who wanted actually a link to the wiki, and most of the plugins that have all the plugins with the user interface, like this one, do have an online help button here that goes to the wiki, to the respective page for that tool. But now you'll be able to have a button on the user interface, which also opens up the browser window on the overview, which is this one, with all the tools in there. So yeah, that's a little helper. And we have also reworked, I think I mentioned that before, reworked the menu branch to be more current and contain all the stuff. So yeah, that's the current state. This went a lot better than last month's plugin. And regarding the UV transform, one thing I want to do over the weekend is just make a small video to show all the shortcuts and show how it's used, and publish that for all of you to look at. So yeah, if you have any questions, hit the chat. I should be able to get a first version out to you by Monday. There isn't that much missing, except for that new thing of multiple polygons per mesh. That might be easier than I think. The more I think about it, the less tricky it sounds. So that might be included by then. And then you will have a, let's call it a preview to play with. And yeah, I'm looking for your feedback and your ideas. Also, one thing I will do for sure is I will draw the green line around all the viewports, because this just doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And yeah, it would also be interesting to see how this works with more complex scenes, how big the delays are, if they are too terrible or not. That would be extremely interesting for me. Because to be fair, most of the scenes that I have right now are essentially just, demo content from Lightwave itself. Let me just quickly exit this while I look at the chat, because I can do a quick recompile and see if any questions come up. Generating code. Catching. Right. Start layout again. What I've done is basically I had a check in there that would only draw the border around the current frame or the current view. I've just quickly removed that check. So now it should draw the border around all the frames. I just want to see if that already works the way it's supposed to or doesn't. But yeah, there you go. This is the border around all the frames. So now you know you're in the polygon picker mode. And of course, it's a green frame. What else? And once you drop the tool, the borders go away. So yeah, that's all there is to show. All there is to say as well. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you like the way this is going. If you do have any questions, join our Discord or just post on the Patreon page. But on our Discord, we also often have like screenshots, small videos, or ask questions about various steps during the development process. And I also try to show not only the things that go well, but maybe some failures as well, because that happens in coding. So yeah, make sure to join our Discord. If you're not a patron and you like what we're doing, join our Patreon. Um, and yeah, that's really all there is. So I hope you will have a nice weekend. And as always, stay safe and stay smart. Bye bye and good night.